Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am excited to have Hardy Smith with us. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to meet Hardy, he is a Florida person like we are. So we're happy to have one of our own with us today. And Hardy is also an author. If you'll see behind him on the wall there, Stop the Blame Game is one of Hardy's books there. So he has an extensive background in working with boards and volunteers, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Both the joys and the challenges of working with volunteers. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Hardy and I'm going to keep working on that PowerPoint.
All right. Thank you so very much, Tammy, and thank you everyone for your patience with our technical capabilities here. And great, I just have to give a shout out to my IOM best class ever classmate Shonda. Shonda, great to see you. Congratulations on your recent chamberversary. So that is awesome. I look forward to also seeing everyone coming up in just a few weeks down in Melbourne at the spring conference. And I invite you all to sign up for the special bonus session that Tammy has set up. When I will be having an opportunity to lead a session with Sherry Ann Kelly, President and CEO of ACCE. Very compelling topic. Chamber leaders at risk, how to avoid landmines that can end careers. Even if you've got a great career going, there's a situation going right now that chamber leaders who thought they had a great career and great relationship going, all of a sudden things changed. Today, you'll get 5 success tips for yay. Look at her. She isn't she just everybody just like a high five, clap hands for Tammy. She's our technical whiz here. Awesome. Isn't she amazing? That's why she's so good at what she does. Um, Today you'll get 5 success tips for from my book, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game, that will bring success with your work for working with and interacting with volunteers. I invite you to use the chat. I'll be calling on you during the presentation to unmute and offer a comment. Raise your hand if you have a question. That's always good. I'll be watching, and Tammy will be helping me facilitate that as well. Everyone who, and I'm not able to advance it. I'm not, so just slide. Tammy, I'll ask you to do slides. So I'll just keep moving. I'm not able to advance it. Um, Everyone who has ever worked with volunteers, especially in the chamber world, knows that volunteers can either be your secret sauce for success or just a real pain in the you know what to deal with. And in the 5 actions I'm going to be sharing with you today, action number 1 is to work with a plan. And so many organizations who have very robust volunteer programs do not work with a plan. So in other words, they really wing it from year to year, or from project to project or event to event. Who has, if you would, with a show of hands, who has who has uh, a written plan for working with your volunteers? All right, so I'm not able to see that. So let me just rhetorically ask, if you have a plan, why does having a plan make a difference? Would anyone care to unmute and share why having a plan would make a difference?
They know the expectations.
Yes, that's important. Anything else? Some of the added added important items in a volunteer management leadership plan. Number one, what should a plan include? What's the purpose of the volunteers? And I would say you could have an overall volunteer plan that covers your use of volunteers year round, or you could have, if a project or an activity is large enough, you may consider having a plan for that particular activity. But the plan should spell out the task. Don't assume, and this happens in the world of chambers. It happens in the world of associations and nonprofits. We tend to kind of do things on a regular basis, and then we run the activity, we run the project, put the notes back on the shelf, and then we maybe pull the notes back again a year later, and then just kind of keep going. It's just kind of rinse and repeat, and we just kind of go with the flow. And we assume, and a lot of times we forget. Well, what about the turnover in a chamber office, on a chamber staff? Wouldn't it make sense if you have a document that is on the shelf that can spell out why you're using volunteers for this particular task, what the roles, what the responsibilities are, how many you need? It's one thing to have 10 volunteers. It's one thing to maybe have 1,000. And there are a lot of chamber activities across the state of Florida that certainly have large numbers of volunteers. But the more specific you are in the number that you need, why would that be relevant? Anyone? I think Melissa knows. So if you
can you hear me?
So the question is, why is it important to know how many volunteers you need?
Oh, well, I generally, for our recurring events, need about 10, but for years we did a beer festival and I needed 100 to 125. And the reason it was so crucial that we had exactly how many is because I didn't have space for extra volunteers to just stand around. I needed everybody who was participating, they were getting a perk of a free ticket to the event. So I had to make sure that they all didn't get to attend the event at the same time, obviously. So I wrote out an hour by hour schedule. I was thinking I was more like a fly by the seat of your pants coordinator, but actually we did have a plan, and we don't have it written down for the staff in general. It's just my own notes, but yeah, to make sure that nobody signs up and then just waits around and does nothing, and then I lose a volunteer for the next year.
That's great job, Melissa. So high five, virtual high five to you. And that is so important to have that structure and intentionality. A primary reason, if I could add to that, Melissa, primary reason for knowing how many you need is how will you know how many to recruit? Right. So if, again, just get some, that's not a very good strategy. A good plan can also identify the experience and skills that are needed. And some projects just show up and help out. That'll be plenty good. But there might be some other activities that are a little more complex. The roles, responsibilities might be a little more serious. So have all of that spelled out. Another benefit of a good plan for working with volunteers, if you kind of think through the planning process that chamber leaders are so good at doing, you can identify potential problems and you can solve those problems in advance. The best advice I ever got during my years of working in the world of NASCAR racing, the best advice I ever got from working with Bill France Jr. was, Hardy, solve your problems in advance. So anticipate what are the problems with the volunteers, and then make sure you have the answers and solutions. I remember one race day in Atlanta, pouring down rain all around Atlanta, except for a little small donut of where the speedway is outside Atlanta. But pouring down rain all day long on the Weather Channel, it's green, except for the teeny little donut. Well, all of those volunteers who worked at concession stands and everything else at a large event like a NASCAR race, they just assumed it was going to be raining. And we saw it on the screen, and they didn't show up. Well, the race fans still did, the race drivers still did, and there was still a race. So there, the fail there, the people at the track had no pre-thought about what if we have a need for contacting all of our workers, and so that didn't happen. Big lesson there. A good plan. Oh, here we go. We're making progress. Yay. A good plan also includes an opportunity for evaluation, opportunity for debrief. Did the project work? Did it fulfill what you were trying to do? And I will share with everyone who's a part of the webinar today. I'll be sharing my template for a good volunteer plan. So it'll be a plug in and play. You'll have that as a resource you can take with you and work through your own volunteer planning. So action item number 2, recognize trends that are affecting volunteerism. And the next slide, if you can do it, please. There you go. We are making progress. There has been a nearly first trend that's so important. I want everyone to make sure you're dialed into what I'm going to share because it's extremely relevant to your chamber situations. There has been a nearly 6-decade downward trend for joining, engaging in all types of organizations. And this includes civic clubs, it includes religious organizations, it includes political parties, it includes everything, including chambers of commerce. And this downward trend, which started in the mid 1960s, hasn't stopped, and there's no indication that it ever will. This means fewer and fewer and fewer people across this country are getting engaged in community organizations. So very relevant to what's happening with your Chamber of Commerce and wanting to recruit volunteers. And for our readers and our students, those who like to read in the group, all of this downward 6-decade downward trend has been shared in Dr. Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone. Bowling, just like going to the bowling alley, bowling alone. Highly urge you to take a look at the data in that book. And there's another trend that is so relevant to our chamber leaders today. There is a nationwide annual survey for state by state evaluation for volunteer engagement on a per capita basis. That's important for me to add in. And on a ranking from 1 to 50, you can see where Florida is, 50th. Now, this is not something that's new. Florida has been at the bottom of the list for volunteer engagement on a per capita basis since this study began years ago. Now, what does this mean? It means from a Chamber of Commerce wanting to recruit volunteers, it means it's tougher if you're in Florida. And here's some nuggets from the survey. I know everyone, we sit around in meetings and we say, okay, we need some volunteers. Hey, I know. Let's get those retirees because we got so many of them in Florida. You want to know the state that ranks the lowest and in senior citizen retiree volunteering? Florida. They come here and they're done. They've done whatever they're going to do wherever they came from. So it's just tougher in Florida. There are a lot of reasons why Florida is at the bottom. And one of the things is there's so many things for people to do as compared to like the number one state in volunteering, the Utahs and the North Dakotas and the South Dakotas, the Idahos, those tend to rank at the top of the list every year. Not a whole lot to do in those states. Let's take a look at some of the other trends. The changing demographics of generations. Here's what's happening. And if you're paying attention to the generational shift, those who are in the senior category, they're pretty much wrapping things up. And by 2030, they're mostly done. The baby boomers, we're still rocking, but again, the number of baby boomers who are showing up either in the workplace, showing up, same situation for volunteering, starting to really move into retirement very quickly. Gen X and millennials still around, yes, of course, but those numbers are declining. The generational group that we're about another year or 2 years away, according to all the data, will be the largest single demographic age group that you've got for recruiting volunteers, recruiting employees for the workforce. And all of a sudden, these are huge generational differences in how you approach them for volunteering, how you communicate with them, how you appeal to their interest, because I can promise you it's the interest for volunteering is there. It will be there for Gen Z, just like it is millennials and still Gen X. The interest is there, but what they're interested in is very different. And you have to be mindful of that. So let me share with you a couple of other trend influencers, and then we'll see if we have any questions, Tammy, about some of these trends. Number one, today's volunteer does not feel the sense of obligation that perhaps the generations or two ahead of them did. What do I mean by that? Well, anyone who's been in the chamber business, for any length of time, certainly knows that at one time the business community, owners of small shops or large businesses or manufacturing companies, felt like it was an obligation to join the Chamber of Commerce and to be an active Chamber of Commerce. Well, we know in chamber world, we're seeing that trend shift dramatically. And so much of that doesn't have to do with the chamber not having a value anymore. Certainly, everyone's chamber does have a high level of value to offer. It's just the people in your community have different thoughts on what they want to be involved in and how they want to be involved. So they're looking for more flexibility. Today's volunteer is not looking to sign up for anything that involves a bunch of meetings. They're more inclined to do micro volunteering. In Florida, may show up and work for a one-day, one-off event, cleaning up the beach, or cleaning up the intercoastal, picking up litter, and then that's it. Now, they might come back again a year later, but they're not going to serve on committees. They're not serving on activities that require ongoing participation. And of course, remote volunteering, hybrid volunteering, some in person, some remote. Have you got activities that can be done via a Zoom or a Teams function? Volunteer motivation is shifting again from the sense of obligation to looking for more of an experience, an experiential experience is what they're looking for. It's something Can they have fun? Is it engaging? Is it meaningful? Will they learn something from the experience? Opportunities to network are still very important. Great. We're going to have Amber join us. That's super. So, all of those are some quick trends that are affecting volunteering and your ability to be successful. And Tammy, let's unmute everyone and see if there are any questions that someone might have about trends affecting volunteering.
They can unmute themselves. They're free to do
Okay.
so.
Okay. Anyone?
Quiet group.
All right, not seeing anyone. So, all right, we'll keep going. So, action item number 3 is be intentional about recruiting and retaining volunteers. So, which is better, recruit, train, and replace, or recruit, train, and retain? Which one's better? Is that a little bit of a no-brainer? I think retaining is a whole lot better than replacing, because how much time right now are you investing in having to rinse and repeat, go out and you got those 10 volunteers this year, last year, and now you're having to go find a whole new 10 or 100 or however many volunteers that you utilize during the course of the year? Wouldn't it be better if you could keep those volunteers and supplement what you're doing instead of having to replace every single year? And in chamber world, time is what? Time is money. Time is money. And I'm not exactly sure if I've ever met a chamber leader, Tammy, anywhere across the country that said, oh gosh, Hardy, we have so much time. Here I am, a president, CEO, executive director of my chamber, and I just can't even think about what I'm going to do with all my extra time. I haven't found one. There may be one out there, but I haven't found that person yet. So being intentional about recruiting of your volunteers, think of this first. Think first about what you need. What's the purpose? This goes back to the plan, recruit to the plan. What is it you need for the volunteers to do? And think about the skills and the experience that you need. Then recruit to the what. Does everyone have that? Recruit to the what. Don't just say, okay, we need 10 people, we need 50 people, we need 100 people, and then just start signing up a list and just hope it all works out. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because you're just adding to your own time constraint. You're piling on to your own time constraints. You're creating a self-inflicted sense of anxiety that's going to certainly hit you later. When you recruit, ask for referrals. So if you've especially got a good volunteer that has a real passion for your particular activity that you're recruiting volunteers and engaging them, ask them, well, who else? Who else? Do you know who would be a friend of yours? And what's the benefit of that? Does anyone share why asking for referrals would be helpful?
To find like-minded people who have the same interests and be passionate to serve and have the experience of working with a friend.
Totally. And that is so high five, you've got it. Working with a friend. When you're working with a friend means you have a connection. Connection equals retention in the world of volunteers. So they'll show up. They're having fun at the event. They feel like they're accomplishing something. They believe this is something worthwhile. They get a chance to share the activity with their friend. So keep that in mind. Makes it very, very important. Another thing that's so very critical in the world of volunteer recruiting and training with intentionality is make sure you get clarity and acceptance on the expectations, the task at hand. Make sure they understand. So these are kind of the HR type questions that everyone is familiar with. Just like if you're hiring someone to work, a new person to work in your office, there's good information you need to know, right? Same thing applies to volunteers. Do they understand the tasks? Do they understand the hours? Do they understand what they will be doing? Do they know when to show up? All the very important things you need to make sure they understand. And do they feel comfortable with taking on this responsibility? And then stop talking, listen for a bit, see if they have questions, make sure you answer their questions about what's involved, and then listen for the acceptance. Don't just keep talking the whole time through, and they're maybe nodding their head, but if you can hear them verbally communicate, yes, I do agree to do this, makes a big difference. Don't just assume you've got a yes and just keep going because you're in a hurry to hurry up and sign up more volunteers. Another thing is so important, and this really depends on the particular task, the level of responsibilities involved, and all of this could be different, or it could be a leadership role within a pool of volunteers, right? But provide the needed training. So let's use a good Florida example of a beach cleanup. Well, anyone in Florida knows if you're going to have a beach cleanup, it's not about just picking up the trash. You've got to be mindful of turtle nest. You've got to be mindful of bird nest. You've got to be mindful of a whole lot of environmental concerns. Oh, the turtles are cute. They're hatching. Oh, is it nice to pick up the turtles and play with them while you're there? Well, for those of us who've been in Florida for a while, we know better. But for the new volunteer who thinks this is just the greatest thing ever, well, you've got to have that environmental concerns conversation and let them know. You could be having an activity that I think we heard earlier about, like something that might involve beer. Well, if you're having a serving alcohol and a whole lot of chamber activities have alcohol involved, there is definite training that's a requirement by the state of Florida and probably local governments as well that's involved with serving alcohol. And if you're serving food, if you're operating concession stand, you've got to have state approved, local health department approved supervisors for each one of those food operations. You can't just open up a food stand and start serving hot dogs or hamburgers or barbecue at the big community event the chamber is sponsoring. So you've got to provide that training. Again, different levels of training are being involved. Because we're in Florida, if you have an event that's involving seniors, there are rules and regulations in the state of Florida for being engaged, interacting with seniors on an event like a community event. And same thing with children. So you've got to be extremely careful. There could be other activities. You might be doing something to assist a homeless shelter. Well, you can't just have volunteers running around taking selfies with homeless people. That's not an okay thing to do. So you've got to understand what you can and cannot do. Any other examples of how volunteers are used by your particular chamber?
We just had a large golf tournament and needed volunteers for a whole bunch of positions.
And so very important. Or at a golf event, Are you using volunteers to be marshals? There are rules, and anyone who's ever seen me attempt to try to hit a golf ball on a golf course knows I really don't know what the rules are. And they really don't even pay attention to even trying to know what the rules are. I just whack golf balls. But if you're running a proper golf event, you do have to know what you're doing. And there's safety rules and regulations as well. And there could be some alcoholic beverages involved. And we have volunteers that are that are driving the golf cart, the beer cart around. Well, do you need safety training for driving a golf cart on a golf cart, a course with other people around? That might be helpful. I've heard some horror stories of golf cart wrecks and collisions, and those can be quite serious. What about, wow, this foursome is really knocking great beer sales with this foursome. Well, how many have they had? Are you keeping count? Are you prepared to deal with overserved foursomes that are out there on the golf course? Oh, we're just trying to have fun. Well, what about when they leave the golf course and they're driving home? So a whole lot to consider. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Tammy, let's go to action number 4. Create a positive volunteer experience. So very important. And how are there any examples of our chamber leaders who make sure their use of volunteers is a positive experience? Any examples you'd like to share?
Hardy, my name's Dave. I just had an
Hey, Dave.
experience with an event, community event, where we provided T-shirts, free admission tickets, and food tickets for our volunteers after their shifts were done. And
Okay,
that seemed
great.
to really help out.
That's good. Good. Thanks for sharing, Dave. Anyone else? And being able to get a small gift like that, being able to get the T-shirt, that's also comes into play in the category of showing appreciation. And really, for volunteers, appreciation and a thank you, that's their payday. They may not be outwardly, we're not going to get into profile assessments, the personality assessments this afternoon. But if you did a personality assessment of all your volunteers, there's going to be a reason why they're volunteering, more than just giving back. So you go deeper than giving back, but there's going to be a reason. And one of the things I really want to share, especially share with you to help provide a positive experience, is simply understanding their why. Why is it important for them to volunteer for a particular project or for the Chamber of Commerce, and understanding what that why is. And if you can have conversations with a smaller number, it might be possible to have individual conversations in the recruiting, in the interviewing. If you have formal interviews with your volunteers, or it might be on the form, intake form that they're completing, include that on the intake form. But what interests them, and the closer you can get to making sure their why is being met, the closer you're going to get to retaining that individual person. Does that make sense? Take time to understand who your people are. And how can you know? Again, just ask. Just ask. So again, in the interview process, the recruiting process, the intake form, could be a paperwork exercise, as I've shared, having conversations during the course of the event, just the management by walking around technique. Just ask. Creating opportunities for developing connections and relationships. We talked about recruiting friends, referring and recruiting from friendships. That's important. And to go even deeper with that, make sure your volunteers are having a chance to meet each other. So is there a social opportunity like an orientation and training session that you have before the event? Is there an opportunity for them to meet up with each other, learn more about each other? And again, the deeper you go in creating connections, the deeper that you go with creating retention. Let me come back to showing appreciation. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait until volunteer of the year at the annual banquet. That's great. But what about a simple thank you? What about a text? What about an email? What about a mention in the newsletter? Anything you can do, the more frequent opportunities you make happen for thanking and recognizing a volunteer, the better. And the advice when thanking someone is always include something about what they did. Just a simple thank you for showing up and helping out is nice. But if you can say, thank you for showing up, participating, and being involved today, and mentioning the specific task that they undertook and did a great job with, they know you recognize them, saw them, and that goes much deeper than just a thank you. Although nice, it just takes it deeper. Any questions, Tammy, in the chat that we haven't addressed so far? Anyone that wants to take yourself off mute and ask a question that we haven't covered so far?
Don't be bashful.
Okay, Shonda has a transition of going through older volunteers. Shonda, would you unmute and please share a little bit more about that, what you're experiencing?
Right. I have a really bad cough. So
Okay, I'm
if
sorry.
I start coughing, I'll have to
Okay,
stop. Um, it's just some volunteers that have really been part of the chamber, I mean, for some 25, 30 years, and they're retired and they're just loving some events to death, is what we call it. And we've tried to transition them out, and then they just come back. And
Boomerang volunteer.
they're very opinionated, and they tend to scare especially some of our younger volunteers that are wanting to get involved and bring new ideas, and
Right.
it's just very difficult.
Those are
It looks
thank you for sharing that, and hope you feel better with that cough. Was there
Thank
someone else that
you.
had?
Hardy, I wanted to say 2 people gave that a thumbs up, so it sounds like there's others that are dealing with that same problem.
Yes, thank you for sharing, everyone. So let's jump on that just for a quick minute. When you're dealing with that individual who really needs to be thanked and released, right? They need to be thanked and released, but they just keep coming back to boomerang volunteers. There may be, and I understand a local community is a local community, and I know the difficulties involved with what I'm going to share, but having the conversation with them, and it might not, it's extremely difficult for that chamber executive to really be in the place of a disciplinarian, authoritative type person was when you're dealing with volunteers. So there may be someone else, that another volunteer that can take this on. It could be maybe not the board, don't get the board chair involved in something like this, but it may be someone else who's been around for a while that does respect the other person, does respect, they have a good relationship, and you just have a you have a frank conversation. Another thing that I've worked with organizations on facing a similar situation is start talking about legacies, and you're not trying to on the surface, you're not communicating we want to push you out, but working with more seasoned, more senior volunteers and looking for ways to create a legacy. And the legacy means that so their good work over a long period of time last. And it's just if they haven't figured it out, the shelf life for us all, there is an expiration date. We just don't know when it is, right? But if they can be a part of setting up the future that transcends to, you're not saying they're leaving today or tomorrow, but they are helping the chamber position when they aren't able to participate the way they would like any longer. And by setting up, they may help. If they tend to be negative, well, that idea doesn't work. We tried that idea. You may not want them involved with younger volunteers from that standpoint, like a volunteer mentor or a volunteer buddy, or doing training sessions. But find ways. My suggestion is to find ways to create legacy opportunities. And like a lot of other things, there are situations where if it's just depending on how tough of a situation it is, Shonda, you just have to bite the bullet. If it's a disruptive situation, it's a negative situation, it's affecting everything else you're doing with your other volunteers, biting the bullet. And again, blessing, thanking, and releasing might be something that you have to consider. So hope this is helpful, and hope you get over that cough soon.
Hardy, I have a question about, I think
Sure.
it ties into this in a couple of other areas. When you talked about training, sometimes the training includes even talking about the culture of the
Yes.
chamber and how, you know, chambers, when you're volunteering on behalf of the chamber, you are the face of the chamber then. Maybe not a paid face, but you are a face. And sometimes I think some people don't realize that you have to be nice. Sometimes you may not want to be nice, but that just goes along with it. And I think, when she says they tend to sometimes scare off members wanting to volunteer. It sounds almost like they need to be reminded about the culture. We used to have, when I ran a chamber, I had a front desk volunteer, and she was loyal. She would be there anytime we asked her, but she was so rude, and she wanted to volunteer at the front desk. And we kept trying to put her other places because that was not the best place for her. You talked
Right.
about finding where they fit, where their strengths are. And finally, I just had to have a conversation and say, I love the fact that you are so dedicated and you're here every time we need you, and the fact that you love the front desk, but I have to remind you that these are our guests and our customers, and you have to treat them like the customer is always right, even though we know they're really not. You have to sugarcoat things and be extra friendly. And I could tell she really tried. And so we let her, and then we would reward the good behavior. But I know that doesn't always work. But, like you said, sometimes you just have to be honest in a kind way.
So true. So true. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Add on to Tammy's comments? No one ever said the life of a chamber professional is easy. And unfortunately, there are these challenges that everyone in the audience today knows all too well. Let's go to
Hardy. Excuse me,
yes.
this is Dave again.
Hey, Dave.
One way I've tried to do that is give them a new assignment that's less lethal, and maybe
Good.
they won't be quite the problem that they were, but you keep them engaged a little bit, and then they eventually, we're in Florida, they'll pass away or something. But bottom line is, they'll still be helping and feel that they're helping, but you can move new people in to do the heavy lifting. So just a thought.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
Thanks.
That's
I'll
that's
shut
good,
up.
Dave. Thank you for that. Anyone have anything they'd like to add on to Dave's comment? That's really good, Dave. Well, Tammy, let's move to action item number 5. Avoiding mistakes when working with volunteers. So the next slide. Here's several mistakes, and then I'll ask what mistakes you may have seen on your own that you'd like to share. The first one is treating volunteers as if they're free help. That tends to get us in trouble. If we start treating when we treat volunteers as free help, and they're just supposed to do what they're told, without all of these other considerations baked in to the recipe with our volunteer relationships, you're asking for trouble. That's when we start telling, we're not asking. And they're there to be asked, not told what to do. They're not employees who are not getting paid. Please remember that. Another mistake is having poor role definition and poor onboarding. Again, it is the reverse of what we shared earlier about the proper orientation and training. We just assume they know, and all of a sudden, it can be a problem. A lack of ongoing feedback and communication. So a lack of communication from the chamber's point of making sure the volunteers are hearing from you as needed, with information that's going to be relevant to what they're doing. Don't just assume they signed up the form and that came to the initial orientation and they that's it. So ongoing opportunities for communication, that's always motivational as well. That's always a way to keep providing some recognition and appreciation and feedback. Ask your volunteers for feedback. And if you're not asking for feedback, listen for it. Pay attention to the conversations they're having as they in their groups as they go about their task. What type of feedback are they? You're the CEO, you're the executive director. They may not be having direct interface with you, but they probably are having a direct interface with members of your staff. Ask your staff, what are you hearing? What are they saying? And your staff team should have their antennas up, listening for feedback opportunities. This is my favorite. So next slide, please, Tammy. Don't delegate and forget. We work with volunteers. We have the orientation. We confirm that they do accept the task, and then we say, great, have at it. Well, just depending on how large of a task it is, just remember, you get what you follow up on. You just cannot, my experience tells me, you cannot assume that just because someone signed up, just because they said they would do what they were supposed to do, you cannot assume they will. Does this resonate with our audience today? Because all too often they forget. It's just not top of mind. So whose fault is that if they forget? The prompts, the communication, don't delegate and forget. Oh gosh, Tammy, this one hurts. Big mistake, not having a contact database. So many organizations who work with volunteers literally could be working with hundreds, maybe thousands of volunteers and on an annual event basis, and do not record who the volunteers were. Name, telephone number, email address, No clue. So every single year, they are literally starting from zero to get the number of people that they need. Doesn't seem like that makes sense, does it? But it's all too often. And that kind of goes into, this isn't about event planning today, but like for our friends that have golf outings, the number of organizations who sponsor golf tournaments that I've heard of that do not keep up with their sponsors, their hold sponsors, all of the different sponsors for the golf outing from year to year. It's a mind boggling. And why is that? Why would that ever happen? Well, number one, because volunteers are in control, they're running it, and the volunteers change. Volunteers from one year change from the next year, and those records follow the volunteer that's no longer there. A little bit scary, but that happens. Here's another one of my favorites. Another mistake to avoid. Do not overload the over eager volunteer. It is easy to give the yes person one more task. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're easy. Oh, yeah, they say yes to everything. But you are enabling a sure case of burnout that will happen sooner or later. What else? Why else is it not a good idea to overload an overeager volunteer? Any other suggestions of why that's not a good idea? Who's got a quick thought?
Too much authority.
Too much authority. That's good. What else?
They don't do what they committed to because they run out of time.
The one person doesn't do what they're committed to because they just can't. They're overloaded. How about this? You're not sharing the workload. A distribution of tasks means other people are involved. You're training other future leaders, volunteer leaders. You could be providing, your volunteer program could be a training ground for future board members, certainly future committee members and committee chairs, right? So don't overload. It's too easy. Don't succumb to the yes. Just it's because it's so easy. Try to find another person to take that on. Oh gosh, I think every one of these are my favorites, Tammy. But another mistake to avoid: not having staff buy-in. Now, why would that occur? Why is that important? Why is having staff buy-in important? Certainly there's some thoughts to share here. Why is it even important? Why should you ask staff about it? Why have their input?
Because they're the ones who end up having to manage these volunteers and work with them.
You go to Tammy's conference, the spring conference coming up in Melbourne. You hear other chambers, your peers talk about how great it is. The events they have, they got volunteers. Maybe there was a speaker, a program, a session on volunteer leadership. And wow, you're so motivated. You come back to the office and the next day after the conference and gather everybody for a quick debrief on what all you learned. And guess what? Or maybe you went to ACCE and you came back and you said, guess what? We're gonna initiate a volunteer program. Well, your staff team, I can just see, can you see the eye rolls going on right now? And mentally, the word clouds that are above someone's head. Great. She's come back from a conference with another idea. Well, what does that mean? It means a staff person probably is thinking, now I have to do my work and the work of the volunteer, especially if we're going to use volunteers in the office. Now, because they're going to mess it up, I have to train them. I have to spend time with them, answering their questions. I can just do the work myself, and it just is a whole lot better. So all of a sudden, if you're not having staff buy-in and having them ask their questions, about how this use of volunteers is going to work, maybe for a first time ever, you're just really hanging yourself out to dry. So make sure your team is involved in development of the plan and the implementation of the plan. Conversely, it's also a mistake not to designate a specific staff member to be responsible for volunteer management. Doesn't necessarily mean that person, the leadership person, doesn't have to be at every single volunteer related event. You could have other members of your chamber staff, of course, heading up volunteers and different activities, but make sure someone is in charge of leading volunteers. And as we wrap up our program today, please remember this: board members are volunteers too. So every single thing we've shared about leadership success tips for working with volunteers applies to working with your volunteer board members as well. I hope you've had fun this afternoon. I hope this has been beneficial for you. Tammy, any questions that we didn't cover, or if anyone has something that we didn't cover, if you'd like to unmute and fire away, have a quick fire round.
Don't be bashful. I think your comment, though, about the board being volunteers is important to mention, because sometimes we forget. And recruiting them in the same way, looking for areas that you need skill sets for your board, not just who's willing to serve, but what type of leader do you need? Someone with financial background, someone, that is a hands-on, that type of thing.
100%. You can take everything that we shared in this session today and just insert in board member, volunteer board member, and it all applies. It's all the same. All of these are lessons in my book, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. I look forward to seeing you all in just a few weeks again in Melbourne for the spring conference. And take advantage, I urge you to take advantage of the special bonus session. Chamber leaders at risk, avoiding landmines that can kill your career. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Well, thank you, Hardy. I would like to say one quick thing before everybody jumps off. The bonus session that you mentioned, if you haven't seen any of my messages about that, what it is, Sherry Ann Kelly, the CEO of ACCE, did an article recently about the trends that she's seeing across the country with chamber CEOs losing their jobs unexpectedly. Have no clue in the world anything's going on. They think everything's floating perfectly. And then the next thing you know, they're being replaced. It includes new execs, old execs, small chambers, large chambers. And so when I saw that article, I immediately sent it to Hardy, and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of scary. And so we had a couple of calls with Sherry Ann, and she is going to be with us at the conference, kicking off the conference, because we're talking a lot about the Horizon 2035 initiative and how chambers need to evolve. But in that also, she did agree to stay afterwards to do this bonus session. It's going to be a very intimate setting with interaction with her, and hearing her thoughts and things that chamber leaders should be able to watch out for, and also ways to set yourself up to make sure you have the right things in place to protect yourself. So if you're the CEO on the call, I would encourage you to consider it. If your CEO is not on the call, don't let them think you think they're getting fired, but make sure that they've seen that information, and that way if they have an opportunity to attend that, it would be great. It's on the website, on the calendar, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And I just want to stress that because I think it's really important. But thank you,
And
Hardy, for, as
you're welcome.
always, you're always
Yes.
a huge supporter of FACP and all of our members, and we appreciate you very much. And I want to thank everybody for being on the call today. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day and that I will see you in just less than 2 weeks in Melbourne. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.